Welcome to ThePrint. For this episode of Laws of the Land, we'll be talking about a law that was introduced as a game changer for effective implementation of government schemes. However, the law itself has been a bit controversial in the past, depending on the sort of issues that arose out of it, from right to privacy to security of biometric data. You must have guessed it by now, the law or the scheme that we're talking about is Aadhaar, the 12-digit identification number with the tagline Mera Aadhaar, Meri Pehchan. The law that we're referring to is called Aadhaar Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidies, Benefits and Services Act 2016. And to discuss this law again, you have me, Apoorva Mandhani. We have with us Bhadra, Sinha, and we have with us Supreme Court lawyer Khushbu Jain, who has worked on several such issues. She's worked on the issues of privacy. So I'm sure she's the best person to tell you more about this law and also about the ancillary issues that have cropped up out of this law over the past few years. Thank you so much for joining us, Khushbu.
Thank you so much for having me here and raising such an pertinent issue.
Thank you so much, Khushbu, for joining here. So the first question is, how did this entire Aadhaar come into being? In the sense, we all know initially it was not a law. It was introduced through an executive order, and it was actually the brainchild, so the UPA government was the one which actually thought about it, but finally it is the Modi government which introduced it as a law. So could you just tell us briefly about how Aadhaar was introduced and how did it become a law?
So it was much prior. 2009 is something when we spoke about Aadhaar, and introduction of Aadhaar started, and they tried to link Aadhaar with subsidies and whatever the government scheme subsidies which were in there, to try to link with it, because it had its benefit, it had its vision that everybody who's been given subsidy by Government of India, if this gets linked, there would be less duplicity. The scheme would reach to the beneficiary, and that's why they started targeting that part. But with that came the aspect of protection, data protection, because at that time we did not had anything called as a regulation, which covers data protection in India. So there it was an aspect that what happens to the security of such a biometric data which you're collecting of a population which is so vast. Mm-hmm. So their entire question started raising. Another question which was raised is, can you restrict somebody who doesn't have Aadhaar to not give them benefits by the government? So that's where it was being held by India that it was unconstitutional. You cannot abstain somebody from availing those services if they don't have Aadhaar. Right. That was where it stopped.
So in the sense, the scheme was actually, or this entire framework was introduced to make sure that there are no, as you said, that, the benefits reach the beneficiaries directly, and the so-called middlemen in between do not eat up, the benefits, right?
Absolutely. That was the thing, and there were a lot of...
Particularly in the rural areas.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of IAs which was been filed. One was by Ministry of, your IOC, HPC, BPC was also the one which filed intervention applications showing the data that how the middleman has been, eliminated from the system, and the places where they have done it, how it reaches to the direct person.
So if this entire thing was a beneficial piece of work, then why was it challenged in the Supreme Court?
Again, the aspect where I'm talking about privacy and security. Absence of data protection regime was one of the important reasons, because the kind of data which, though it's a unique number which has been given, unique identity which has been given to each, and there were a lot of benefits to it that you can't have duplicity of it. With that was also an aspect that certain biometric data which are very crucial are being collected.
When you talk about biometric data, can you just explain
so when you talk about biometric data, it's your iris, it's your fingerprint which are being saved over there. These are very crucial data. And see, imagine that day, we are talking about some time back when we thought that this is gonna pose a great challenge or risk to country. Today we are in the age where we are talking about metaverse, where your digital identity would be everything if we enter into that world. If somebody has your biometric details or have access to, and it goes to a wrong person, it creates a huge fiasco, and it will create unimaginable kind of a challenge which none of us can fathom. So there is where we realize that there has to be a security measure. So security was one of the aspect. The other aspect was the privacy, which was one of the facets that came out of the challenging of Aadhaar, that individuals have right to privacy. And what was being challenged, if I may just put it out, was that with mobile, And with Aadhaar, there can be an aspect where privacy of Indian citizen can be challenged. There can be, compromised. That was one of the reasons that challenge happened.
So, during while the Aadhaar petitions were pending, a very interesting question of law was raised by the then Attorney General, because of which we had the most popular Puttaswamy judgment, which declared privacy as the fundamental right. Can you just tell us briefly about what this entire hearing was about in the Supreme Court?
So, right to privacy became one of your fundamental.
And why did this actually, why did this question actually arise in the first instance?
So, privacy. So, you say that right to life cannot be a life. It cannot be a dignified life if somebody doesn't enjoy right to privacy. When I talk about right to privacy, that every individual or every citizen should have protection towards its own thing. Like, for example, there should be an aspect of privacy in whatever I have. It can't be just a privacy. So old times we used to talk about privacy when you talk about trespassing, that, in your house, nobody can enter. And if somebody enters, there are provisions in IPC where you say that it's trespassing and you can go and, file an FIR. But with advent of internet and how things have evolved in this entire, time with technology, with IoT devices, we realize that technology has a lot of potential, and with internet coming in, your privacy can be a digital privacy also, which plays a very important role. Hence, they said that a person had to have a dignified life, and for that dignified life, it cannot be without giving them protection of right to privacy.
So this was an argument which was raised by the petitioners, right, in the Aadhaar matter. But the government had a very different viewpoint. According to the government, privacy is not a fundamental right.
No. So according to government, also it's fundamental right. But the aspect that was there was, so I'll go a little back with it, that the entire Puttaswamy judgment which you're talking about came up with an aspect which said that, okay, there should be a right to privacy. And when you say right to privacy, it should have, how do you enforce it? So that's where another thing that came out from the judgment, which will lead to the next in thing. And that is that with right to privacy, though you and me have a right to privacy, but every time if your and my right to privacy gets infringed, are we going to file a writ petition in the court? Now, we are in the world where collection of data or using of data is very normal. So when I am collecting your data, let's say you have come to a building and they collect your data, whether they are allowed to collect the data, how much data are they allowed to collect, are they allowed to keep that data, not keep that data, whether it is essential, not essential, and whenever they collect data, can you and me and go file petition against them that my right to privacy has been infringed? I should have an open right to come. That's where came the aspect that they said, okay, let there be a committee being formed who will look into how this enforcement should be done. Hence, the data protection framework should come up. With that data protection framework,
that's what the Supreme Court had actually said in the Puttaswamy judgment.
Absolutely. So they asked Justice Sri Krishna committee should be formed. Now that Justice Sri Krishna committee looked into the 9 basic principles of privacy, 9 principles which was there, and those principles are in numbers like 5, 6 or 9 recognized worldwide. Those 9 principles of consent, explicit consent, collection purposes, limitation purpose, security, and right to be forgotten is one of the ambit of it, and connection. How do you connect somebody who has collected your data? So information that what my data is. Looking at all those things, Justice Sri Krishna committee gave their own proposal that this is how a framework should be. Now that framework is what is going to define that a data fiduciary, somebody who collects your data, what kind of data it can collect, how they have to keep security measures, till when they can store that data, and when they have to delete the data. With the same thing, you and me as users will understand that a company is allowed to take your data, how much, what data is there with them, what are your rights, and in case your data has been infringed, what are the rights available to you and what happens. So that entire framework is the one which will guarantee in itself the right to privacy, which is now embedded in Article 21 of your constitution.
So this was the data protection regime was sort of, if it's not in place right now, but it was the idea was sort of an offshoot of this whole issue that came out of it.
You can say that in a nutshell, it's an offshoot of.
So 2017 was the Puttaswamy judgment on right to privacy, and a year later though, that's when the court then tried to test whether the law infringes upon that right to privacy, that it has just upheld and raised to the standard of a fundamental right. What happened in that judgment? If you could explain for our viewers.
The Puttaswamy judgment?
The 2018 judgment that upheld the law, Aadhaar Act.
If you talk about Aadhaar Act, when they upheld, few aspects were very clear that, okay, you want to touch upon, we can, there's an aspect which is still there, which is the money bill.
Right.
Yeah.
So we can talk about it briefly.
We can talk about it briefly as well, but in the sense, the majority verdict of the Supreme Court had upheld the Aadhaar law.
Yeah.
But there was a minority view which was by Justice D.Y. Chandrachud. According to him, it was unconstitutional. So if you could just briefly tell us about the majority view and the minority view.
See, the majority view was of the aspect that there is a major component of Aadhaar which constitutes or which can be part of, what can be part of money bill. Hence, it is constitutional and it can be considered as money bill, and it has been passed as a money bill. So we don't find anything wrong in that, and it can continue. At the same time, Justice Chandrachud was very clear that this is something which is not a money bill. And if you put bills like this and put it into a money bill and continue, this would be grave injustice, or it would be against the Constitution, the basic framework of Constitution. It would be unconstitutional. So that's where that dissent came in, and now that it can be referred to, it's a larger bench which has to
look into
the matter.
Yeah.
So in a way, you can say, because there are major portions of the bill which do not directly fit into what constitutes money bill, but at the same time there are other portions of it with. So that's what the majority and minority view of the court was.
Apart from the money bill aspect, what were the other ancillary issues that the court was also looking at? If you could tell that to our viewers, are the provisions that were brought up?
See, voting was another aspect to it, whether to link the voting aspect of it with Aadhaar, whether you can link. So in between there was another aspect, whether you can link the Aadhaar card with SIM cards, the authentication. So there were a lot of challenges which
the PAN card as
absolutely the PAN card as well, that can you link it, because these all things directly link, and if you mandate, then it becomes that it's a complete circle. So with one number one can have everything looked into of a person.
So the court said something about mandatory linking.
So mandatory was something which became optional. Let that not be a mandatory thing. Let that be an optional thing. Let there be some benefits which people get it, but let that not be a mandatory aspect of Aadhaar being linked for you availing services or you availing things. At the same time, when you say voting, that I think there are few petitions which are still challenged in Supreme Court, and notices have been issued. Where linking of Aadhaar with
the voting
card is something which is under challenge.
And I was just saying, so as of now, there are two issues that are related to the law that are pending. One related to the money bill and one relating to the voter, at the linking of it with the voter ID. If you could, for our viewers also, since we're talking about the law, we've spoken about the constitutionality, if you could tell the viewers a bit about what the provisions of this law also say, not the entire thing, but like just what all does the law provide for?
Aadhaar Act?
Yes,
Aadhaar.
yes.
Okay. So Aadhaar Act.
Before you go ahead, one question I have is that is it like mandatory for us to have an Aadhaar, or is it voluntary?
It's a voluntary for you to have Aadhaar, whether you want to have it, not have it. So it's not compulsory for you to have Aadhaar. It's a voluntary thing, whether you want to have it, not have it. With that, what kind of benefits doesn't come is something there, but nobody can deny you those benefits if you don't have.
Now that's another point I wanted to ask you, is that if the court has said that mandatory linking is not required, it is not needed, so can anybody be denied benefits for lack of Aadhaar?
So if somebody is denied those benefits, you still have an option to challenge that again in the court, that the benefits which as a citizen I'm been entitled to, I'm denied just because I'm not having a number. Those basic services cannot be denied to you. Something additional, again, that's a thing to be looked into. But the basic services which somebody is bound to have it or entitled to have it, if they have been denied just on the aspect of not having an Aadhaar card, that's something which is not permissible, and you can still go and appeal in the court and challenge the same.
Now, can Aadhaar be treated as an identity card, or is it just like that 11-digit number? Or is it like, can it substitute something like a passport or an election ID? Or is it just an additional document?
So see, it can be constituted as your ID, as an additional document for your verification. But at the same time, comparing that with your passport is still not there, because Aadhaar is not just for citizens.
Okay.
Aadhaar is for
everybody.
Everybody and anybody. So you remember the aspect which we came up, that Aadhaar can be given to, the reason for Aadhaar came up on the aspect that it want to give subsidy to people.
Yeah.
And that was not restricted to anybody who's just citizen of India.
I see. Okay.
You need to be resident of India is what was there.
Okay. So it is not like
not a passport kind of
not a document.
Not a document for your citizenship.
For the citizenship.
Absolutely
it is not
not.
that.
Absolutely
it is simply
not.
an identity
It's simply an identity of yours. Okay. And there are a lot of other things which were there, like for example, when you were also asking me a question, that it becomes easy when you mask it. Also, you can mask your Aadhaar, right, but authentication can happen without providing any physical document to anybody. So that authentication is something which is amazing, which can
Can you just explain it a little bit?
So, like for example, if I have my number, Aadhaar number, or there are technology comes in place, you just put your, let's say, thumb, it cross checks that, okay, it is me, and you can go. So 90% of data breaches happened, or identity breach happens, that somebody steals your identity, is because all our physical cards, duplicates are everywhere. So that can be eliminated, that physically you might not have to give your cards, and you can still mask your number, and the unique number, you can mask it and give your card. That's still there. You can mask it and give, or else you can have that authentication being done so that that duplicity doesn't happen. And even somebody who forges your identity card will not be able to do the same, because that being a unique is unique to you, and you also cannot have two Aadhaar cards.
Okay. So
since Khushbu is speaking about masking, it's just removal of the numbers, but you don't do it yourself. If you go to the UIDAI website and you ask for a masked Aadhaar card, they would provide you with a PDF of that, just to let our viewers know about it. So now, Khushbu, just taking you back, because we haven't spoken about the provisions yet. If you could just give an overview of the provisions of the Act, what does it exactly provide for? It of course provides for that identity card, but what else does it provide for?
So with Aadhaar, the Act which talks about the salient features are, it's your unique identity. So when I say it's unique identity of yours, that means it's a valid ID which can be provided across India, which will be accepted by everybody as a valid ID. So something, if I talk about valid ID, something like your license,
right,
which are recognized identity cards of yours, which can be given as your identity proof. Right. The other one is e-Aadhaar, e-identification, which can be done, which we just spoke about, that you can electronically verify yourself, which we do it via PAN card. Whenever you fill your
IT returns.
IT returns is where e-verification has been done, and after that e-verification is done, you get your number. So the process goes very smooth of your verification. So another aspect is that for the smoothness and speedy process, this e-verifications works as a benefit to everybody. And apart from that, Aadhaar plays a very important role. When I say it's unique, it's to you only. So the aspect of duplicity goes away. So a lot of crimes happen because of the aspect that people have your identity cards and they try to commit crimes. 80% of the crime, the basis goes to mobile numbers. So if you, let's say, start doing those things, though it's not compulsory, nothing is compulsory right now when you talk about Aadhaar, but if you put that as an identity, people wanting to issue your SIM on your name is less. So whenever you see crimes happening, you say that let's get to the root. Like if it's social media, then he must have registered social media via OTP coming on his phone number. Once they go to the phone number belongs to you and me, and they know that this has not been done by us. So they escape law by using these things. So that's where all these things will come as a benefit, that it would at least let go of identity. Stolen identity aspect.
So Khushbu, we briefly touched upon the privacy aspect also, and you also spoke about the data protection bill. So could you just, for the sake of our viewers, just tell us briefly as to what is the stage of this bill now? Is it in the offing, or is it finalized, and what is the government planning to do? And how is it, how will it impact the citizens?
Okay, so in a nutshell, that Puttaswamy judgment, then Sri Krishna committee, the 2019 bill, the data protection bill is what we are talking about, personal data protection bill. That bill was been put, and then JPC sat on it. From 2019 till 2022, November 2022, there were 100 plus amendments which were being suggested, and it was it was to and fro with discussions like how much power the government should have or not have, with discussions like localization, data localization, with the aspect that who should be exempted, who shouldn't be exempted, the other aspect that how much penalty should be imposed. So the earlier bill spoke about 2% to 4% penalty on your global turnover per breach.
Okay.
So let's say a company takes your data and there is a breach at the company because of less security measures being put in place. Because of that breach, today nothing happens. But with this bill that would have come, they would have to pay per breach 4% of their global turnover. That's a very high penalty to look into. So those were the things which are to and fro discussions. That bill came into 100 plus amendments which lost its shape a little. Hence it was recalled.
Okay.
By the Parliament, and then after that recall, the new bill was being given, which is your Digital Data Protection Bill of 2022. That bill was being open for stakeholders to give suggestions till January 2023, and now that's where we are waiting that the next session, parliamentary session, we should see that bill coming in. That bill, if I just give you a basic salient features, it's 30 sections only, a very small bill which talks about the 9 principles of privacy, which gives users right that what kind of data you have, whether you have a right to be forgotten, where you can ask data fiduciaries. Data fiduciaries are everybody and anybody who collects your data, that whenever the purpose is done away with, like for example, I have given a data for XYZ purpose and now that purpose is gone. So you can ask them that please delete my data, I don't want to be there.
Okay.
So that right which individuals need, right to be forgotten, which was much discussed in the K. Puttaswamy judgment, is something which is now there part of this. They have also talked about aspect of cross-border data sharing, which is sharing of data across country, across country, which enables businesses to share data, and globalization can flourish. So there are a lot of aspects like this. Apart from that, there are heavy penalties here as well. So that's another aspect. So if that bill comes in the same shape, these are the things which we are looking into.
Okay. With this, we've reached the end of this episode. In this episode, as you saw, we spoke about the Aadhaar Act. We discussed about the offshoots of this Aadhaar Act, the right to privacy judgment, the data protection bill, and we've also spoken about and told you about what the law says and the pending issues with the Supreme Court related to the Act. I hope you enjoyed this show. Thank you so much for joining us, Khushbu. Do let us know in the comment section what you thought about this episode, and like I always say, if you have a law that you would like us to discuss, take up, talk about, do let us know that as well. Thank you so much for joining us.